Hello movie barfs and welcome back to the channel. Taxi Driver is one of those polarizing films that either you'll see as a cinematic masterpiece or as an insomniac aid. There's hardly any middle ground in between. If you're in the former camp, you'll know it's one of those compelling films that disturbs you, but yet somehow manages to arrest your attention all the way up to the credits. While it has inspired other films, most recently being Todd Phillips' Joker, the film is still in a class of its own and has only seemed to age better over time, like a fine wine. There is just so much to cover and appreciate about this film, from the way it's shot to its cinematography and atmosphere, its music, its acting performances. Way more than can be included in this short video, but the highlight for me was its deep character dive into an everyday man's mental descent. Ultimately, Taxi Driver tells the story of one man's loneliness and the resulting mental spiral that comes from it. At the start, the film is narrated by our protagonist, Travis Bickle, almost like it was a diary, an in-depth look into his personal life and psyche. Fresh out of the Vietnam War, he works as a taxi driver at night due to his insomnia, and the one main trait of his we are quickly introduced to is his loneliness. He describes himself as God's lonely man, and it's not too difficult to see why. He's socially inept and rubs people the wrong way, from the small interactions of asking the cashier at the movie theater for her name, all the way to the epitome of bringing a woman to an adult film on their first date. Travis Bickle is one of the loneliest people you'll ever see on film. He starts off the film looking just like any other ordinary guy, but beneath that unremarkable exterior is an emotionally disturbed man on the verge of snapping. His life is dull and boring, and he struggles to find meaning amidst the gaping sense of emptiness he feels. His nightly cab drives reveal the moral decadence of society in all its ugliness, and he grows increasingly disturbed by it. The inciting incident for him occurs when he asks Betsy out for a date, a woman who he's been admiring from afar. After their first date goes sideways, Travis's mental state quickly spirals downwards. He turns himself into a walking arsenal, buying guns from an illegal dealer, most notably the iconic .44 Magnum made famous by Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry. He then befriends an underage prostitute played by Jodie Foster before she's shot to stardom, and eventually he makes it his goal to free her from her captive lifestyle. Robert De Niro's screen presence here is something noteworthy, and although he is largely stoic and expressionless, he still gives off this intense, eerie vibe. The sheer minimalism of his acting here is remarkable. Sometimes less is more, and this is certainly the case here. This probably is De Niro's best performance aside from his role in Raging Bull, and definitely one of the best acting performances of all time. To me, Robert De Niro will always be Travis Bickle. It's his most definitive role, more memorable than Vito Corleone in Godfather Part 2 or Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull. And if his performance wasn't memorable enough, we're also given one of the most quotable lines in all of cinema history, with a "you talking to me" monologue. Travis Bickle is also one of the most unpredictable characters you'll ever see on screen. It is this not knowing of what to expect from him that contributes to much of the film's tension. His actions don't make sense because he isn't rational himself. He's a morally gray character, and it's one of the reasons why he's a great protagonist. You don't really know whether to root for him or against him. Sure, he does some weird and morally questionable stuff, like planning to assassinate a presidential candidate he was previously rooting for no other obvious reason than just because the woman who dumped him works at his office. But at the same time, he also has some redeeming qualities, most notably in his attempt to free Iris from her pimp at the end. And speaking of which, the film doesn't sugarcoat some of its atrocities. There's this scene where Harvey Keitel's pimp character and Jodie Foster's Iris are slow dancing together, and he tells her how lucky he is to have someone like her. It's an absolutely revolting scene, made worse by the actual look of calm and safety on her face. The film is disturbing because it tethers closely to the edge of reality, and it's not comfortable to watch because it's not supposed to be. Life is uncomfortable sometimes, and rather than hiding the ugly side of life, it brings it out front and center. The film has a really dark tone, and there is pretty much no humor to mention. It works with the plot because there is really nothing that could be funny here. Most of the movie takes place at night. We often see the bright lights of the yellow cab contrasted against the dark, rainy streets. Some of the day scenes look off-note, but this was likely on purpose to show that Travis is in his element the most at night. The ending of the film couldn't be better. It's deliberately ambiguous so you can't know for sure what happened. Was Travis hallucinating at the end before his death? Was that what the overhead slow-moving tracking shot was trying to imply? Or did he actually survive and go on to become a hero in the media? I'm leaning more towards the former. In the movie's last scene, as Travis drives away after dropping Betsy off, he looks back menacingly into the mirror, as if to communicate to the audience that a problem still exists, and then we fade back to what looks like the start of the film. The only thing we know for sure is the mental descent that Travis has undergone throughout the duration of the film. It shows how a regular, everyday guy like Travis can become something drastically different at the end. And that's disturbing. Overall, Taxi Driver is a cinematic masterpiece, hitting all the right notes in all the right places. Like an orchestral symphony, the different tunes all mesh together to create an enchanting melody. Much has been said on the acting and the character development, but the movie is also certainly embellished by its catchy jazz music soundtrack, which plays a major role in setting the tone and atmosphere of the film. It's definitely a key component contributing to the success of this movie. The cinematography is also something to behold. There are some really great shots of the city's rain-soaked streets at night. It makes you feel as if you're traveling through the streets yourself from the perspective of our protagonist. It's not exactly a pleasant film experience, but it's a must-watch if you're into serious character study films. Movies like these don't come by very often, and they stand out as landmarks in the history of filmmaking. Thanks for watching, folks. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.